Once upon a time, a princess from a small kingdom had a common skill: she could see the percentages of sympathy for her. However, after using her power to become a spy, she was betrayed and sentenced to death at the stake. When her body began to be enveloped by flames, her desperate prayers were heard, and something strange happened. Now, she will use her ability to make the Five Prince help her with her revenge. Story begins with the Holy Grail safely returned home and given to His Majesty. She was supposed to steal the Holy Grail for Louis but was captured. The Lin Empire was infiltrated by a spy who dared to trespass on their holy treasure. The girl was led to a public execution. Mary Dekwa is sentenced to be executed by burning for her crime. The people shouted and waved their hands in joy at this execution. The girl was tied by her hands to a pole, and looking down, she saw Louis standing next to a man. The man was thanking Prince Lu for coming from the kingdom of Ronia itself. Louis had no idea that his former fiancée would commit such a grave sin, so Louis took a torch from a guard and went to his ex-fiancée and said that he, as the ex-fiancé, would take the responsibility of getting rid of her personally. The girl, being tied up, could see that even though Louis wanted to kill her, his sympathy for him was off the scale by as much as 95 points. Louis knew of Marie's gift of being able to see another person's affection for themselves, a handy ability for a spy like her. She wanted to steal the Holy Grail to end the war that plagued her homeland. Marie was tied up, trembling with fear, and in the same trembling voice, tried to ask what he was doing there. Louis said that everything went according to plan. He was handing Marie over to them, and they were giving him the Grail. They'd just trapped her in a trap she'd never be able to get out of. That's when Marie realized that their relationship and that everything between them was a lie from the beginning. He never loved her. Seeing how helpless and desperate Marie was, Louis said he loved her. Then Marie looked up at him with some hope that he was telling the truth, but suddenly with a mad grin, he came up to her and said that she was useful to him, so how could he not love her? And in the same second, Louis' sympathy went up to 99. Maria couldn't believe it. Louis came up close to her and told her he loved her, then he threw a torch at her feet to set the whole wooden structure on fire because he loved her. He had to cleanse her of her sin before the fire got to Maria. Lou said it would be lonely for her to die like this, so he spilled silver hair out of the bag and said her family would be waiting for her on the other side. Marie realized that the hair belonged to her mother's father and her brother Alan, and he killed them all. Louis still stood there smiling and said that her little brother, Lou, was crying and begging to be spared. Although what did he expect from a boy of 11? But he killed not only her family. He killed all the maids who admired Mary and killed the knights who swore allegiance to her and got rid of her favorite nanny. She screamed and fought to the end, saying that it was not Mary's fault and her blind faith had failed her and he had fed her to a hungry lion. Marie couldn't believe his words because Nanny was her dearest. He gathered up everyone she loved and helped them go to heaven. That's how much he loved Maria. He was also happy that the Qua dynasty and all her country was over. He didn't want Marie to be sad because he would take care of her lands after she was gone. But Marie was no longer just desperate, she was angry that her lover had done this to everyone she loved. But despite the fact that he said all those horrible things, she could see how much he sympathized with her. It was still 99, and Louis was indicating that he still loved her. And when the flames got to her, she was already racked with anger because her family, her home, Louis, had taken everything from her, and then she cursed him, hoping that if there was a God, he would hear her. Her only hope was to rub the rope up against the pole, but it wouldn't work. She didn't want to die, she didn't want innocent people to suffer because of her. And if she had one more chance, just one more chance to save everyone. After these thoughts, the Holy Grail glowed. After a second, she opened her eyes and saw someone in front of her. Someone was calling out to her in a familiar way, there was a familiar voice, someone asking if she was okay. As soon as she realized it was her nanny, Aya, she jumped out of bed surprised and happy at the same time that she was alive. Aya said she moaned loudly in her sleep. Marie asked Aya for permission to examine her and began to feel her to make sure she was not dreaming and was really alive. Marie didn't understand how this could have happened because Aya should have been dead, but now she was standing in front of her alive and well. She realized that she was definitely not in her homeland. This was her room in the palace of the Kingdom of Link. Aya excitedly asked if Marie was all right. She also asked her nanny that she had come to Link Kingdom for the festivities, and nanny replied that she had. The royal family was having a celebration for the kingdom's 120th birthday. Then Marie asked when this celebration would be held, so she said the party would be held tomorrow. Marie realized that she woke up the day she arrived in Link Kingdom. Suddenly Marie jumped up from the bed and hugged Aya as she was happy to see her, but Aya didn't understand what was going on with Matey. Marie couldn't hold back her tears that her nanny was alive. She swore that she would protect her even if it cost her life. Aya said it was her job to protect her and take care of her. Marie must be exhausted from the trip. She should have rested before the gala because tomorrow would be a big day. All 5 Princes of Link Empire would be present at the gala. Aya was going to prepare her clothes for her, and in the meantime, Marie could rest. Then opening the huge glass doors, she went out on the balcony, and she remembered to stop the war. Louis had convinced her to come to the gala to gather information about the 5 Princes and steal the Holy Grail for him. And right now, Marie was determined to get her revenge. A carrier pigeon from the kingdom of Ronia was supposed to come to her. A moment later, a carrier pigeon arrived with a letter. Opening this letter, she read that Louis hoped that she had safely infiltrated the kingdom of Link and that she was not to reveal her true intentions. Once they had the Holy Grail, they would have the wedding they had dreamed of. After she read the letter, she crumpled it up and couldn't believe the bastard had tricked her. But even if she returned to her homeland, breaking off her engagement to Louise wouldn't be easy. She needed a plan. Aya had already returned, and Marie turned to her and asked her to help her style her hair. Louis had only offered Marie his hand and heart because of her ability to see people's sympathy. Because of this, she had one eye as yellow as the sun. And with this power, she had to get the 5 Princes of the Kingdom of Link on her side and end the war. She decided to play the role of a spy for Lys until the day she ended his life with her own hands. Thanks to Aya, Marie felt better and was ready to take a little walk around the palace. As Marie walked around the palace, she realized that she had really gone back in time. She walked past the courtyard where the knights were practicing. Marie needed to convince Louis that she was still on his side, and at the same time, she needed to find an ally among the 5 Princes of the Kingdom of Link. And she needed to make a peace treaty with them on behalf of the representative of the Daryuri Kingdom. Marie had to choose her key target, but then she saw a golden-haired prince studying. It was the first prince of the Link Empire, His Highness Alexander. Then Marie remembered how the guards had caught her because they had been informed of her whereabouts by Prince Louis himself. And then Prince Alexander approached them. He hadn't seemed nice or kind to her at the time. He had been possessed by anger and had called her all sorts of names. Now he was practicing fencing and had won the duel by disarming his opponent. Marie hurriedly turned away to avoid his gaze as she didn't want to deal with a psycho like him again, but he turned around and found her with his eyes and did not take his eyes off her. The Link Empire, the country that dominates the continent, is celebrating the 120th birthday of the empire this year. The ambassadors of all countries gathered for the sole purpose of marrying at least one of the 5 Princes of the mighty Link Empire. The first prince of the Link Empire is Alexander. He is the son of the Empire Link and was considered a master of military affairs. Even at a young age, he had already demonstrated outstanding abilities. The second prince of the Link Empire is Alistair. He is a calm and collected young man, even rumored to have a taste for beautiful women. But he was too windy. He broke the hearts of many beauties from all over the continent. The third prince of the Link Empire is Lucas. He is an eccentric scientist absorbed in his research, even said to have made a breakthrough in the study of plants. The fourth prince of the Link Empire is Kai, the black devil of the empire and master of the sword that took over the western lands. Although despite his formidable title, he has a very kind character. The fifth prince of the Link Empire is Elliot. He is a mysterious young man that never once went out in public without a mask and was considered the strongest magician on the continent. When the prince walked the red carpet, Marie stood aside and thought that they were all handsome and skillful. Which prince would be the easiest target for Marie? She used to curse this ability, but now she wanted to change the future of her loved ones with it. She vowed that she would change her destiny. That was the end of the welcoming ceremony. The guests were asked to follow the instructions of the servants and not to leave the ballroom in a hurry. Then Marie went back to her room and said that there would be a diplomatic ball in the evening. If people reached 50% sympathy, they were already favorable to Marie. Her family had over 60% sympathy for her, but to get trust from the interlocutor, his sympathy had to be 40%. A friendly relationship starts at 50%, and to put her plan into action, one of the prince must have a sympathy percentage between 50% and 70%. Then Marie told Aya she was going to the ball too, and Aya wished her to have fun at the ball. That's when Marie found the dress that fit her plan. Last time, she was told about the Holy Grail by the second prince, His Highness Alistair. He had been attracted to her beauty and politeness and simply couldn't keep his mouth shut. Walking down the hall, Marie saw Alistair and realized that it was not a good idea to target him, as his windiness would make it hard to get a steady liking. As she passed him, she even heard a girl whispering to the other girls standing around him. Then she turned around and decided not to go in his direction. Marie went out on the balcony and sent a letter by carrier pigeon. In the letter, Marie wrote that she hoped diplomatic relations would last until her return and that she wanted to know about the situation in Darua. Also, she hadn't found the Holy Grail, and she was trying to earn the trust of one of the 5 princes. Darua had made a friendly pact with Ronia, and one wrong move on her part, and Darua would be doomed. Suddenly, she was interrupted and shouted to her what she was doing there. Turning around, Marie saw Prince Alexander. He realized she was the woman who had been wandering around the palace and wanted to know what she was doing there. But Marie had to calm down because she had to let him know her true intention. Then Alexander pushed her against the wall and demanded an answer. Marie blushed and replied that she wanted to meet His Majesty Alistair here and give him her message. She handed the message to Alexander. Alexander started to read it, and it only said that as soon as she saw Alistair, she realized that he was her destiny and asked him to meet her tonight. Marie explained that it was just a love letter, and she was ashamed of it. So she asked the prince not to look at it too much, but the main message was written in invisible ink so that without light, he wouldn't see anything. Alexander couldn't imagine her with a lover, and it was at that very second that Alistair came up to them, having heard that the conversation was about him. Alexander handed the note to Alistair and told him that this girl wanted to see him. Alistair took the note and said that Alexander had unscrupulously taken the letter that was meant for him away from the nice lady. As Marie stood watching their conversation, she thought that the love letter was just a distraction and that she had not expected to meet the second prince, much less talk to him. Then Alistair approached Marie and apologized for keeping her waiting. Alexander then realized as he left that he had indeed spoken to her. Alistair told him that she was so nice that he couldn't pass by without laying eyes on her. Alexander then realized that Alistair was once again looking for a plaything for the night, but Alistair replied that his relationship didn't concern him and asked him to leave them alone. Alex turned around and hurried away. Marie managed to escape from Alexander's clutches, but now she has another problem. Alistair pointed to the letter and asked if it was meant for him. Marie smilingly replied that she was glad to meet him in person and everything she wrote in the letter was true, but her letter didn't include his name. Then the letter could have been meant for anyone, so Marie decided to say that she was so worried that she forgot to sign the letter. Maria could easily see that Alistair didn't believe her, so he asked her if it was true that she claimed to have fallen in love with him at first sight. Marie replied that as soon as she saw him at the welcoming ceremony, she couldn't take her eyes off him. Then Alistair offered to seal her confession with a kiss and approached her and took her hand. Since she was against it, he asked her to let him do it. On the other side, Alexander was about to enter his office when the black cat, who turned into the 5th prince, Elliot, came and asked what Alex needed from him. Alex asked him to increase the surveillance on Alistair and also to check on another guest. Elliot needed to check on the princes of the Daryuri kingdom. She was going to meet under the cover of night in Alistair's chambers, but his room was on the 3rd floor, and he thought it was suspicious and wanted to question her, but Alistair interfered. Then Elliot remembered that every year on the Empire's birthday, rats sneak in to steal their national treasure, the Holy Grail. Their job is to stop any suspicious individual from stealing it. Elliot nodded and ran back into the cat, and Alex said that if he found out anything, he should report it to him immediately. But as far as Alexander knew, Princess Daryuri was in a relationship with the Prince of the Kingdom of Ronia. Ronia had helped the kingdom of Daroa in every way possible in their precarious situation. This woman was still daring to have affairs on the side, betraying her benefactor. At this point, Marie, standing near the window, realized that Alistair was clearly toying with her, but she had no intention of giving in to him. So she slapped him in the face for being so brazen to her, but Alistair even liked the fact that she was acting like that and was more interesting than he thought. And his sympathy level went up. Marie replied that she just wouldn't tolerate being played with like other girls and moved closer to him, pointing to the mark on his neck. Alistair realized that she wanted special treatment. He intercepted her hand and pressed it against the wall, telling her to answer him. Since she wanted to meet him in his chambers, what had she forgotten there, and how did she intend to hand him the letter? Marie had just read his lips. He intended to meet with another tonight and wanted to create an alibi for himself on that basis, but it didn't go according to plan. Then she told him that she thought she'd run into him here. Alistair said that his room was in another part of the palace. Then why was she here? Marie pointed to the windows behind them and said that she wanted to visit his chambers to deliver a message but was afraid she wouldn't find him there. So she came here because this balcony overlooked his bedroom window. If the light came on in his bedroom, she would go to him. But to Alistair, it sounded like a perfect lie, and too perfect. Then he decided to ask her what she would do if he were with a girl in the bedroom, but she just said that she would be very unlucky. Then he loosened his grip and decided to put his arm around her, saying that he wanted to talk to her seriously. Now, he was not a fool, so he realized that she needed something from him, and he was willing to help her in exchange for her cooperation. But at that moment, she didn't understand why he needed to cooperate with her. Meanwhile, in Alexander's office, Elliot brought the dossier he had collected on Princess Daryuri and the prince from the kingdom of Ronia. It turned out that Princess Maria Dea of Daryuri was engaged to Prince Louis of the Kingdom of Ronia. Alexander was amused that she had a fiancé and yet she was making eyes at Alistair. Then Alex ordered to bring Maria to him, and depending on her answers, he would decide whether she should live or not. Alex noticed that Elliot was wearing an invisibility mask, one of their national treasures because their empire prospered through communication with other countries and technology exchange, and peace was of paramount importance for their empire. But not everyone wanted peace as much as they did, so Alexander's job was to get rid of them. There was a knock on the door, and Marie entered the office. Marie stood in front of Alexander's desk, and he said that last night she had told him that she wanted to give Alistair a love message. Marie confirmed that was the case. He then showed the dossier on her and said that Princess Daryuri was engaged to the Prince of the Kingdom of Ronia, to His Majesty Louis. Marie was surprised that he had gotten this information so quickly because their engagement to Louis had never been officially publicized. She didn't even have time to justify herself to Alexander with the way he was pressing her. Alexander kept saying that she had one foot in the marriage and dared to make eyes at the second prince of the Link Empire, and for such boorish behavior, he thought of imposing sanctions on her kingdom. But she was well aware of the consequences. Alexander assumed that if this girl was planning to seduce Alistair at the behest of Prince Ronus, he would have to stop her attempts here and now. At the same moment, he roughly grabbed her arm and asked if she had anything to say. At the same second, Alistair walked into the office and asked how Alex dared to treat his lady so rudely. He walked over and pulled Marie to him, ordering his brother to let her go. But Alex grabbed her wrist again and told his brother not to stop him from doing his job. But Alistair wondered what his brother's job was. Alex explained that the woman was a suspected spy and she could use his senses and exchange information with her fiancé. Alistair only let out a slight chuckle and said that Alex was immature, and even though his beloved was engaged to another man, it didn't interfere with their love. Alex was angry because he thought his brother didn't know what he was talking about. Alistair also said that their family had never been able to share, but he would not tolerate such boorish treatment of his lady. But Alex told him that she was currently being questioned by him, and while they were bickering with each other, she thought it was better to stay out of the conversation. Alexander also said that he would not let Alistair take her away from him this time. But Marie was outraged by this treatment, so she pulled her hand out of the first prince's grip and asked how dare he treat her as if she were something to be taken away. When she pulled her hand out, Alexander was left with only her glove in his hand. Then Marie and Alistair turned and walked out of his office. He was angry, and then a golden mask appeared in the air, followed by Elliot telling him that he should calm down because if he chased them, it would attract unnecessary attention, which they didn't need. But Alex realized this himself, so he asked Elliot to follow them. Meanwhile, Marie and Alistair were climbing the grand staircase, and she realized that she had almost been exposed. But the problem was that now Alistair might be suspected of being a spy. Then he turned to her and said that since she was suspected of espionage, they should discuss the details of their cooperation as soon as possible. Then she remembered last night when she had tried to ask Alistair what kind of deal he wanted to make with her, and he had said that one of his brothers might be eavesdropping on them and they could only talk in his room. But they had come not just to his room but to his private guest palace because here they could not be disturbed. But don't underestimate his older brother, he was like a mad dog. If he saw a weakness, he would cling to it and would not let go until the end. So Alistair walked her into the room and sat her on the bed. But she said, frightened, that she hadn't done anything. Then Alistair toppled her on the bed and said that she hadn't done anything yet because he didn't care if she was a spy or not, he just needed a smart ally. Then Marie asked what His Highness was up to because if he didn't treat her as an equal, she couldn't help him. Then he thought women liked to be unequal to men. Then she rolled him over on the bed and told him she wasn't everything, and only then did she think she was wrong to do it because her sympathy quotient wasn't high enough to cross him. But then he smiled and said she really was an amazing lady, and his sympathy level went up another 6%. When they stopped fooling around, Marie asked how she could help him, and then Alistair told her that there was a ball this week and he wanted her to go with him. But Marie didn't understand why it was so simple. Then he added that at the ball, he wanted to present her as his bride. Then Marie decided to ask why he wanted to do that. She thought that if he made a peace pact with the Dar Yuri, she would agree to anything. She also said she would like to know the reason for his desire, and that she swore on her family's name that she would not tell his story to anyone. Then sitting at a small table, Alistair told her that he had actually been in love a long time ago, but that she had died because of him. One day with his buddies, they went hunting, and it was a rather ordinary event. But when they were returning to the palace, they were attacked by assassins from another kingdom, and during the fight, he fell off a cliff and lost consciousness. He was much luckier than his friends. Marie decided to ask why he suddenly started to undress in the middle of the conversation. Alistair took off his jacket and began to unbutton his shirt, explaining that every time he told the story, no one believed him, so there was irrefutable proof of the attack on his body. But Marie was starting to blush, she understood, but because of his playful nature, she couldn't take such actions calmly. She said she believed him, but then he turned his back to her, and she saw 2 long and large scars that stretched from his left shoulder blade almost to the middle of his back. Alistair said he could have died that unfortunate day if it hadn't been for a girl named Lily who took him in. At Lily's house, there was a small table where her whole family of 8 people, including himself, ate dinner. It was the first time he had eaten at a table where the whole family was gathered, and despite all the inconveniences, the moment was clearly imprinted in his memory. Marie had asked him if he'd stopped visiting Lily after his recovery, and he only nodded. Then Alistair remembered being at her house and telling her that her house was as cozy as ever. Lily thought it was cramped and noisy compared to the royal palace, but Alistair sat with her siblings and said that he was only too happy to be there because he was tired of his arrogant brothers and indifferent father. Then he suggested to Lily that he take little Molly for a walk while she cooked dinner, but it wasn't hard for her to do it herself, and it was rude of her to burden him with her siblings. But Alistair had enjoyed spending time with them, and he wanted to help her with the chores. Lily agreed to accept help from His Highness. Then Alistair said that she could not address him by his title but only by his first name. Then Lily said he had been very kind to them. Memorial Day was just approaching, and he wanted to invite Lily to go with him. However, on the day they met, he found her dead. Marie asked with horror who had dared to kill her, and Alistair immediately answered that the only one who was capable of such atrocities is the niece of the king of the Empire Link, Carla. Marie had heard that she had been nominated to be Alistair's bride more than once, but for her to do such a thing was beyond her comprehension. Why she would do such a thing, and he told her that she had followed him once, saying that Memorial Day was coming up, and she wanted to go to the party with him. But then Alistair turned her down, saying that he had already promised to go with another woman to the party. Carla was very much in love with him, so she was very jealous and thought he was hers. She did it just because she was jealous, that was her whole reason. Marie couldn't believe that someone's life could be cut off so quietly for such a thing. Alistair didn't know why she was obsessed with him, but after that incident, she never left him alone for a day. The king had no reaction to her strange behavior because he didn't care. Carla left lipstick marks on his clothes and stole his things, but his father was convinced that they would marry in the future. Carla was his father's favorite niece, and he also had an amazing relationship with Carla's father, his uncle. And because of that, no one ever thought that he could have a marriage with someone other than Carla. Then Marie realized that he needed her to break his engagement to Lady Carla, but it was risky to do so, knowing her jealous temperament. Because every time he proposed this plan to his lovers, they were reluctant to help because they knew that he was engaged to Lady Carla, and they all knew that she should not cross him. Then he didn't have time to finish, and Marie agreed. Marie didn't know how scary it was to be with someone who was literally obsessed with you, so she would help him. After all, that crazy woman had taken the love of his life away from Alistair, and she could be in the same situation. After all, Alistair wasn't playing with a woman's feelings, he was just looking for an ally. Then Marie was surprised that his sympathy level immediately went up to 14%. Then she began to think she had chosen the right ally. Alistair asked her if she realized that there was no love waiting for her in this marriage because he just wanted to be free of Carla's shackles. Marie understood that, but she had a condition that he would make a pact of friendship with the Daryuri Empire, for she too had those she wanted to protect. For Alistair, it was a fair offer, and if the ball went well, he would immediately file a document of Commonwealth. And so they made a pact. Alistair warned Marie that after the engagement was announced, Carla would try to get rid of her, so they had to be very careful, and she had to stay close to him. Marie didn't think she'd do that again. Then he picked her up and spun her around and couldn't believe that Marie had actually agreed to the marriage without fearing for herself. And then Marie said that it would be worse for Carla if she tried to infringe on her life because she was a princess of a small country. But if someone dared to harm her, there would be a brutal military conflict that the Link Empire didn't need, and it would be short-sighted to kill her, knowing her origins. Marie already had an idea, but she would need a new dress and jewelry for it. She explained to Alistair that the niece of the king of Link's empire. Carla is a beautiful but fiery lady, and they can get rid of her by pushing on her weak points. Alistair understood and said that the ball would be held in a week, so he would have time to prepare everything. And until then, he asked her not to leave the territory of his guest house because she should not forget that Alex still suspected her, and if she left the house, he would try to detain her again. She realized that he wouldn't rest until he got her out. Alistair also told her not to worry because he wouldn't let his brother set foot here, and if she wanted to go for a walk, he'd be happy to keep her company. Then he said goodbye and left the room. She sat down and wrote a letter that the matter had moved forward, and to fulfill the plan, she had agreed to a false engagement to His Highness Alistair. And as soon as she knew more, she would let him know. After she finished writing the letter, she went out on the balcony, thinking that she needed to be honest with Louis until the pact with Daryuri was official. He would know about the engagement anyway, and any unnecessary secrets would lead to unnecessary suspicions. At that moment, a carrier pigeon flew in, and she pinned a message to its paw. Suddenly, the wind blew, and the fifth Prince Elliot and the first Prince Alexander appeared before her. She was worried that he would not see her sending the letter. Then Alex said he knew she was engaged to someone else. Then she saw that the dove hadn't flown away yet and decided to divert the prince's attention to herself and fell into his arms, saying that she felt sick. But Alex noticed that the dove had something tied on its leg. Then she nestled into him more, distracting him, but he quickly realized it. Then grabbing her hands, he took off his belt and tied her hands, and at that moment, the dove finally flew away. After that, Alex ordered Elliot to move them into his office. Now they could talk without his annoying little brother. And then she sat in the chair with her hands tied and said in an indignant voice that she was the princess of the Daryuri kingdom and what right they had to keep her by force in this office. And now there was no way she could avoid talking to him. Then Alex said that if she was innocent, he would let her go quickly, she had nothing to worry about. Marie realized that if she let her guard down even for a second, she would be accused again, and then she would be executed. So she hatched a plan that she would not wait for him to question her but would strike first. Maria turned to His Highness and said that if he wanted to be alone with her because he had tender feelings for her, he could just ask. Alex blushed at her boldness. He didn't understand where she got all this from. And Marie was surprised how easily he lost his temper. Marie blushed and said that it was the first time a young man tied her up against her will and dragged her to his office, and it suggested some thoughts. But Alex denied it as he did it to keep her out of the way. Marie told him what people would think if they knew that the first prince was dragging lovely ladies into his office against their will. She decided to keep pushing until he gave in and sent her out of the office himself, and Elliot was watching. Alexander began to untie her hands, saying he had no other choice. And the moment he leaned towards her, she tripped, and then he hung over her and got very close to her. Maria decided to make fun of him for being pushy. Did he really want to possess her so badly that he literally stole her, and now he was doing this? He would explode with embarrassment and have no choice but to let her go. Then she said that since she was a suspected spy and he was calling her in for questioning, His Highness just wanted her attention, and that just talking to her was enough for that. Then she got up from her seat and sat on his lap. At that moment, Alex didn't understand what she was doing and looked at Elliot and asked him not to leave. Then she jokingly asked him that apparently His Highness wanted their love to have an audience. Alex couldn't take the pressure and ordered Elliot to bring her back. Then he untied her hands, and as a final touch, she approached him and told him that she would be a spy for him even if she was just a princess. But next time, they would just talk without his lecherous games. Elliot sent her back in the same second, and Alex didn't have time to answer her. Then he looked at Elliot, and he asked not to be misunderstood, but if he had such a fetish, he wasn't going to judge him. Alex immediately answered that it was a misunderstanding, and she was just in his way, and that's why he had to tie her up, and there was no lewd subtext in it. It was surprising that the military strategist and the first general of the Link Empire was interfering with some lady. Elliot decided that it would be better for him to leave Alex alone, but he didn't understand why that was so necessary. And then Elliot said that he was blushing so much that he thought he should have cooled down a bit before they continued their work. Then looking in the mirror, he realized what his brother was telling him. Then they realized that they had missed the princess again, but this time they decided to just watch her. Then Alex left on his business, and Elliot stayed in his office and went to the mirror, thinking if they would be alone again if Princess Daryuri would be able to get closer to him. Marie reappeared in the second prince's guest house, and just as he was home, he wanted to discuss something with her. But when he saw the marks on her wrists, he ran up to her and asked what had happened to her. But Maria didn't know if she should tell him that his older brother had treated him so disrespectfully by literally invading his home. But while she was thinking about it, Alistair thought she had been forbidden to tell him. But Marie quickly replied that no one had forbidden her. Then he said that if Marie didn't tell him, he couldn't keep her safe, even within the walls of his home. Marie had to tell him that she had been kidnapped, but she did not specify that it was Alex. At the end of the story, he said that now she would sleep with him, but Marie didn't understand why she had to do that. To which he replied that he had a rather big bed, and they could easily fit on it together. He continued that she was probably kidnapped by his younger brother Eli, and he was in cahoots with Alex, and he could do it again. But if Alistair was around, he could protect her, and he certainly wasn't going to molest a lady without her express consent. And even though he said so, she ended up in this situation. In the morning, she woke up in his arms, and he was sound asleep. She tried to wake him up because he was too much, but then she realized that he was having a nightmare, and it was obviously about that girl Lily. Most likely, he was still tormented by guilt because he couldn't keep the only person he cared about safe. Marie was really sorry that he had to go through that nightmare all alone. Then he mumbled Ben's name, and Marie thought he was dreaming about Lily. But he chased after him, and when he caught up, he came close to Marie and smelled a delicious and pleasant aroma. Marie couldn't stand it and started to shake Alistair awake. And when he finally opened his eyes, he could not understand what had happened. Then Marie said with a disgruntled look that he was too sticky and pointed to his neck. When he saw the mark, he apologized to her as he dreamed he was catching up with a big dog named Ben who lived at Lily's house. The day of the ball came, and when Marie arrived, she was greeted by a servant who told her that His Highness had asked her to wait here. Then Carla showed up and called her just another wench and simpleton. Alice had always had a taste for such uneducated fools. And what a horrible dress she was wearing! It looked as cheap as possible and didn't fit today's festivities. That's when Maria noticed Carla. Carla came up to her with a smile, picking up the stone that hung around Maria's neck with her fan, saying that it was cloudy and looked more like a coal than a jewel that should be worn around her neck. Mary said with a calm and unperturbed face that it was a gift from His Highness Alistair. Then Carla slowly began to boil. Then Maria continued that in case she hadn't heard, it was a VNTH stone, a rare gemstone that is mined from the scales of petrified monsters, and such stones are not just rare, they were only available to a few. It also changed color when heated, but Carla already knew that. Carla also said that His Highness Alistair was too kind to commoners like her. But Carla wanted to be honest with her and said that he was just playing with her feelings, and he would never take her relationship seriously, no matter what trinkets he gave her. Carla was quite famous in social circles, and she could find her another suitor she wanted because she would not let her go empty-handed and broken-hearted. She felt sorry for Maria, but then suddenly, Alistair came from behind and asked her why she needed him because she already had him. Then Alistair touched her hair, and Marie realized that he had opened her neck where there was a mark, and he had arranged her hair to cover it. He apologized to Marie for keeping her waiting. He turned her around, grounded, and kissed the back of her hand, saying he still couldn't forget how magical last night had been. Marie smiled back at him, but remembered that in his dream, he wasn't kissing a beautiful lady, but a dog named Ben. When they moved away from Carla, Marie said that they had managed to hurt her ego, and it was all thanks to his favorite dog. Carla was so angry she broke her fan, walking through the pile of guests. Maria noticed Alex and Elliot among them, but the princes noticed her too. While Alex was looking at her, he remembered how she was next to him in his office and told him that next time they would just chat without his LWD games. After that memory, he blushed again. Maria noticed it and didn't understand why he blushed so much since she had to behave so loudly and compromised her pride. Alistair also noticed his brother blushing and wanted to know what was wrong with him, but Maria said it didn't matter, and it was better if they went quickly. Elliot was very interested in Alex's reaction, but he only watched as Maria left with Alistair. Meanwhile, young men kept coming up to Carla and asking if she had come alone, and she said that yes, although she had thought of spending the evening with His Highness Alistair, he had gone with someone else. Then the guy thought that the lady didn't know about Carla and His Highness Alistair's relationship. Carla explained that His Highness is so kind, and he can never refuse a lady's request, but since that was the case, he asked her to dance. Carla was pleased with his attention, but her heart belonged only to His Highness Alistair. The guy, blushing, couldn't believe that he could trade her for some stranger after all the feelings she had for him. And he couldn't let it go, and then this guy fell into her trap and became a puppet in her devious hands. And she realized that such charmers were very easy to control. That's when he went to Prince Alistair. He approached them and turned to Marie, asking if she had any idea what she was doing. He grabbed her by the sleeve of her dress, tore it, and said that this man had a lover and how dare she seduce him. Alistair was so angry that he was ready to kill him and said how dare he treat his companion as if she were some plebeian. Then Carla came up to them and said sympathetically that she felt sorry for her dress. She looked at Alistair and was determined to protect her toys from disgrace as well as he. Carla said that the young gentleman must have been overcome with emotion after talking to her and it was her fault, so she apologized for the incident. Alistair realized it was just another one of her games, and Maria realized that when Carla was alone with her, she would say nasty things. But when she was in the company of men, she would turn into an angel, which was disgusting to Maria. Carla also said she would make sure she got a new dress. She had a servant bring her the best dress she had and escorted the lady to her chambers. Marie knew Carla wanted to take her away from the ball, but she wasn't going to let her, so she told Lady Carla not to bother. Marie noticed that everyone was already watching their scuffle, and this was her chance. Maria turned to Alistair and said she didn't want to ruin the evening with such a small thing as a torn dress. So he asked her to dance. When they started to dance, Alistair asked her if she was sure of what she had done because it could be seen as rude to the royal family. But she was sure it would make them all shut their mouths. Then Alistair pulled her to him and kissed her forehead and offered to show her true beauty to everyone. Then Marie realized that he too was eager to put Lady Carla in her place. He pulled the bow on her back that held up her dress, and in that instant, all the couples had their eyes on her. Then her dress changed to a gorgeous scarlet as blood and beautiful as a rose's dress. All the girls recognized that it was so graceful and so beautiful, and the men recognized that a very charming lady had come with Prince Alistair. Alistair himself couldn't take his eyes off her. Carla tried to get away from the crowd, but everyone was saying that apparently the rumors were true, and the first of the 5 princesses to marry would be His Highness Alistair, and this lady he brought to the ball was rumored to be his bride. When Carla heard this, she did not tolerate this buffoonery, for she had even saved the man, but he still looked at the girl with such adoration. At the end of the dance, everyone was delighted. Marie had asked His Highness to design the dress so that it would look very simple on the outside and hide a real masterpiece on the inside. After the dance, Alistair's sympathy rose to 16%, and coming up to her, he put his arm around her and thanked her for the dance. To tell the truth, Maria couldn't dance at all, and it was surprising that she didn't give him all her legs. Alistair said that everyone was worried about her torn dress, but Maria said that it didn't matter now. Then Alistair also said that it wouldn't matter now that her mark would be seen by everyone. Carla couldn't believe that a cheap girl like her could get so much attention. She decided to go up to Maria and told her that they had a very interesting trick with the dress. Maria turned around and saw that Carla's sympathy level was already minus 20%. She didn't expect it to make her that angry. Maria said that the dress was His Highness's idea. Carla was surprised that they were so close to His Highness Alistair, and she would like to be friends with the lady and suggested they have a glass of wine. Carla wanted to personally take care of her death. Maria had finally waited for this moment. She was so kind to Maria, and she could not refuse such an offer. And then Carla fell into Marie's trap. Maria continued to twirl and dance, and Alex couldn't help but say that it was beautiful, and he didn't even know that their empire made such beautiful dresses. Elliot, standing next to her, was equally shocked by Alex's words. Elliot could not believe that his brother had succumbed to the charms of what he suspected. He decided to ask if he liked her so much. Alex immediately said yes, and he would like to admire her as long as possible. Then he said, Elliot, who had some urgent matters to resolve, so he would leave, asking him to continue watching them. Elliot listened to Alex for a reason. All his life, he had been used by a sect of mages in their bloodthirsty rituals, and he could have lost his life if it weren't for His Highness, Alexander. He gave him family and shelter, so he owed him a lot, and that's why he carried out his orders without questioning the other side. Carla showed a bottle of wine, saying that there was only one bottle of it left in the world, guaranteeing that it would be for their pleasure. So she asked the servant to serve, but while he was going to do so, she saw the label of the wine, realizing that it was from Dor. She also noticed that the man was tense and could not control himself at that moment. Carla remembered that His Highness Lister preferred Link Empire wines. As she tried to hold his hand, the prince just said that he was not worthy of drinking such a rare wine, moving his hand away from Carla. But the girl said that she was sure she didn't like her that much, and that's why she decided to give her a glass of wine from the Link Empire. She looked at the situation and noticed that they were not drinking the same wine, even though her glass was not suspicious. She was sure it was poisoned. Carla hoped she would enjoy this rare alcohol that she had discovered, especially for her. The wine contained a slow-acting poison that would gradually dry out her body inside, and in just a few days, she would become a mummy, with each day being like hell for her. Carla would also make sure that a huge mirror was installed in her living quarters so that she could watch her beauty drying before her eyes. Only a few moments separated her from this unimaginable spectacle. But then Maria said that it must have cost a lot of money to get such expensive wine directly from Daku. She knew what kind of poison it was, knowing that even if she took a small sip, she could be doomed immediately. So Maria said she didn't think it was polite to open a bottle of wine so rare without offering it to His Highness. Carla said that in her empire, it was customary to give the best to her guests, so she didn't need to worry, as His Highness wouldn't be offended by this. Maria realized how she didn't want Alistair to drink the wine. So she decided to just pretend to drink the wine and then catch Carla off guard when it didn't work for her. But that was when the prince stopped her. Alistair said the wine was from his country, and that Maria often drank it in the company of her family, so he also wanted to drink it. Maria realized that he definitely shouldn't drink this wine. Carla didn't want him to drink it either. So she got up and dropped the glass of wine on his white suit. As she had jumped and wanted to take the glass away, his wine And as Carla ordered the servant to serve another one, as he was not authorized to have that one, so he left, asked why he wasn't allowed to drink it, or if there was any other reason why he shouldn't drink that wine, privately. At that moment, Carla could only reply that he had stained the scarf on his suit with it and wanted to send a servant to get a new suit. But after that, Alistair extended his hand to Maria, and they left, leaving Carla well irritated. Maria and Alistair entered the room where a servant had already brought a change of clothes, but she left quickly, leaving Maria confused. Alistair explained that he did not allow the servants to help him change or wash, since he didn't want to scare them with his appearance. So Maria started to wet the cloth, thinking about how he was royalty and it should be normal to be treated like that, no matter how he looked. She went to Lister and started cleaning him, but he said she shouldn't touch his skin, as if there was poison in the wine, she could get hurt. But she told him not to worry because he thought the poison couldn't harm his skin or Carla's skin. He would have let the wine spill, so he realized that Maria was very attentive. She decided to ask why he had left, since if the wine was really poisoned, they would have physical evidence of his guilt. But he reminded Maria that the wine was from her homeland, and perhaps Carla didn't poison it on purpose. Maria realized how she could teach that the wine was already originally poisoned. So she would also take advantage of that, placing the blame on her kingdom. Then she said in amazement how wine was one of the main economic industries of her kingdom, and Alistair had saved not only her life but also the honor of his homeland, thanking him very much for that. Then she looked at the sympathy index, and it glowed immensely. Alistair said they were allies, and that's why they had a duty to help each other. He was also worried about what was happening between her and Alexander. But at first, Maria didn't even realize what he was talking about. Then he remembered that when his two brothers looked at them at the dance, they were both embarrassed. Then Maria remembered the episode in Alex's office, getting red, saying that there was nothing that connected them, since she couldn't say that she had to flirt with Alexander to escape the interrogation. Alistair leaned into her face, realizing that she wasn't telling him something new, but this time she was embarrassed to even remember this conversation. Right now, someone knocked on the door. Alistair threw his shirt and opened the door, and behind him was Elliot. Elliot looked into the room, saying he thought Miss Daku was with him. Then Elliot installed his fingers, and a feather appeared in his hand. He told Alistair that he wasn't interested in talking to him but that he had some questions about that feather for her companion. Then she realized that was the feather of the pigeon she was using to send letters. She guessed they realized she was using pigeons to communicate with Lewis. At that point, Elliot asked if the princess could give him some of her time, but Alistair blocked his way, asking what he wanted with Maria. The fifth prince swore he wouldn't hurt her, but that wasn't an answer for Alistair, so he asked again what he wanted. But the princess had to know what he wanted to ask, so Maria said she would go with him. Alistair didn't understand why she agreed to go, trying to stop her, but she took his hand and repeated as Elliot had sworn he wouldn't hurt her and that she would come back soon. So Elliot took her to the bedroom, and with the snap of his fingers, turned on the light. Maria approached the lights and realized that people were telling the truth that he was the best wizard from across the continent. At one point, she became very fixated on him, trying to please everyone around her. Elliot became fascinated by the answer, saying that magic could be good or bad, depending on who controlled it. So he played deciding to get straight to the point. He showed a bubble on his hand, and there was a pigeon on it. He said that on the other day, this pigeon had left the second prince's guest house. So Maria explained that she had just sent a letter to Lewis as their countries had been friends for many years. But Zot was not convinced and asked if she would care if they knew the contents of her letter. Then she was frightened, thinking that if His Highness Alexander found out what she and Lewis were up to, his death would be inevitable. Again, then suddenly Ot says he could forget about that pigeon if she fulfilled his request, so she asked what it was. With this request, he suddenly conjured a rose, knelt down, and invited Maria to admire the rose garden. Maria thought she didn't understand what he said, asking where he had invited her to go. Elliot repeated that it was to the rose garden since it was in the flowering season, and she could admire them in all their glory. That Alexander often spent time in the rose garden when he needed to collect his thoughts, and Elliot was sure he was there now. But Maria thought it was very simple, and so she thought there was something wrong, hoping it wasn't something else. His Highness's trap. Alexander O.T. assured that it wasn't just him who wanted his brother to spend time with a lady he liked. So he asked her what he had to do to gain her trust. She thought for a second until she told him to show his face, as he doesn't let anyone see his face. So if he really wanted her confidence, he had no reason to hide his face in front of her. Prince Elliot never goes out without a mask, and no one outside the royal family has ever seen him without a mask. For everyone, he is an introverted prince who does not let anybody get close, preferring to keep his heart and personality a secret. Elliot tried to confirm that if he would take off the mask she would go with him, which she nodded, agreeing, saying she wouldn't go back. Being surprised, she noticed that he was so eager to go to the garden with her that he was willing to reveal his identity to an unknown girl. Elliot said he wore that mask of purpose, still hiding from the guilt that the dark arts cultists had placed on him. But he had to repay Alexander for saving his life somehow. He had to do what he could. So he removed his mask and asked the princess not to go back on her word. Maria approached him, already admiring him that he was even more beautiful than she expected. So he asked if the princess was satisfied. Maria realized that it was crazy to agree to such a dangerous adventure, but she agreed after all she had promised. Then Elliot thanked him and put the mask back on, and the rose in his hand glowed. Then he put on the mask, and he asked the lady to close her eyes. After a second, she opened her eyes and was amazed at how beautiful it was there. It was the first time Maria had seen such a variety of roses. Elliot had said that His Highness Alexander liked roses very much. Marie was surprised that a cruel man like Alex liked such elegant flowers. Elliot also said that if she liked the rose, she could have it for herself. So Marie began to walk around and look at the roses, and finally she chose a beautiful blue rose. Elliot said that this rose was of the Lauren variety and that this kind of rose was very common in their empire. Elliot also said that there was a very beautiful legend connected with this rose, and then Marie asked him to tell it. Long ago, the king of their country fell in love with a commoner, and at that moment, Elliot saw that His Highness Alexander had arrived. He turned around and said he would tell the story later. He remembered that he had forgotten one thing in the workshop and asked him to wait here. And running away, he disappeared. Then, turning around, she thought it was like he was trying to get away from someone, and then she bumped into Alex with papers flying out of his hands. Marie hurriedly apologized because she wasn't looking where she was going, and it was her fault. But when they both saw each other, Alex asked what she was doing here. Then Marie said that His Highness Elliot had invited her to the garden to admire the roses. And when she gave him the papers, she saw the drawing of the dress. And then Alex said that her dress knocked everyone's socks off, and every lady at the ball was whispering about how she wanted to buy the same dress. So he thought it would be another source of income. Marie thought it wasn't a good idea. Then Alex wanted to know why she thought that. Although the dress was very spectacular, its construction is quite complicated because, at first sight, pulling the belt and revealing a completely different dress is not a complicated idea. But in modeling such a dress, you need to think about the style of the fabric of both dresses. Also, the dress may not open the first time. So although it is beautiful, it took a lot of time and materials to achieve this result. Alex thought that she was unusually clever, and if it was her who thought up such a dress and controlled the whole process with the tailor, Marie went on to say that it would take a lot of money and investment to produce such a dress and that it might not produce the expected result. Then Alex said that these remarks were very useful, and he would take them into account. And then he noticed the rose in her hand. Marie hurriedly explained that His Highness Elliot had allowed her to pick any rose she liked. Marie thought that he must have been angry that she had come here, and then she remembered that he loved roses, and she thought she would be able to assuage his anger. Then Marie gave him her rose, and the prince blushed because it was Lawrence rose, and in the Link Empire, if a man gives you such a rose, it is comparable to a declaration of love. According to legend, the king fell in love with a commoner, but despite their different status, he gave this rose to his beloved and swore eternal love. They were married, and their couple was loved by everyone. This legend is still very popular in the empire, and giving a rose to Laurent is a very tender and sensual gesture. But Alex thought that she didn't know about this legend, so he asked her why she shouldn't give this rose to Alistair. He still thought that for her, it was just an ordinary rose, and she didn't see any meaning in this gesture. Marie hoped that His Highness Alistair would like her gift. Then Alex said that any man would be happy to receive a gift from his beloved, and then his heart gave a strange thumping sensation. Then Marie asked to be excused, and Alex told her to wait. Marie wanted to know what else His Highness wanted to ask her. She thought that he would not start a new interrogation and just let her go. Then he handed her the sheets and asked her to tell him a little more about her dress. Marie was surprised by this request because it almost seemed to her that he wanted to say something else. Alex kept thinking that he couldn't just let her go and that there was something wrong with him. Marie looked at him and thought that she was so excited about the idea of starting a new business and that she could, but she had already explained everything to him. Marie pointed to the pattern of her dress and said that the silk embroidery used in the dress was almost invisible, but it stood out in the light. But when the wind blew, Marie decided to fix her hair, and Alex saw the mark on her neck and thought it was Alistair. Then Alex blushed as he realized what he had just thought. It was Marie who pulled him out of his thoughts. Marie had the feeling that he wasn't listening to her at all, and he was blushing, so she decided to ask him if he was all right. Then Alex abruptly took the papers out of her hands and said that he had already found out everything he needed to know and wished her well. After that, the prince hurried to leave, and Marie stood with the rose and did not understand why he changed his face so sharply. Then, looking back, she looked at his sympathy, and it went up to 11%. And while she was looking at Alex, Elliot came back from behind and apologized for the long wait. But Marie was scared. Even though she knew he was a mage, she didn't see the need to sneak up on him like that. Elliot told Marie that he would escort her to her chambers, for brother Alistair must be waiting. Marie asked if he had found what he was looking for in the workshop. Elliot said he'd found the tool he needed and would go straight to her. In fact, he had been watching them and their conversation the whole time, and he was glad that everything had gone well. Then Marie noticed that he was very pleased with himself. Then Marie hoped that Elliot hadn't forgotten about their arrangement. After all, that was the only reason she had agreed to go to the garden. Elliot said that he had never seen a pigeon before. She gladly gave him her hand, and they disappeared from the garden. And at the same time, they appeared in the hall. From there, Maria reached the room and entered it, where she was met by a very worried Alistair. And the first thing he did was hug her. He was very worried about her and just as happy that she was okay. Marie couldn't understand why Alistair was so worried about her. Though she could understand his feelings, within the palace walls lived a mad woman who had killed his beloved, and Alistair feared he might lose someone again. But she would never let that happen, because she would not only save her life but also kill that sick Lewis. Marie gently pulled away from Alistair and told them to come into the room as they needed to discuss a plan of action. Then Alistair noticed the rose in her hand. Then Marie remembered that she wanted to give him the rose. Then she said that His Highness Elliot had shown her the rose garden and allowed her to pick a favorite rose, and now she was giving it to Alistair. Then he asked Marie in a distant way if Elliot had told her what the rose Laurent meant in the language of flowers. Then she said she hadn't known that. Marie replied that she had just thought it was very pretty, so she had plucked it. Then she asked what the meaning of the rose was. Alistair answered that it was a rose of Laurent. According to the legend, King Link gave it to his beloved, who was a commoner. And in the language of flowers, this rose meant eternal and pure love. Marie blushed and realized that she wanted to give such a rose to that lunatic. But Alistair decided to accept it anyway because this rose is given to a special person. Marie also said that they didn't have such feelings for each other, so she would rather give the rose to someone else. But Alistair had already received it from Marie and did not want to give it back. So Marie asked His Highness not to be so mean. He approached her and asked who she was going to give the rose to. She hastily replied that she was going to give it to her nanny Isla because she was like a second mother to her. She explained that Isla was dear to her heart, so she wanted to give the rose to her. Alistair then decided to give the rose back to her, and she thanked him for it. But Alistair said that the next rose Laurent wanted was his. Even though it was a joke, it sounded to Marie as though he really wanted to get the rose from her. Marie and Alistair walked down the corridor and couldn't understand what was going on because there were many maids, and one of them said that they couldn't find Isla. Marie couldn't believe that Isla was missing because she had been there before the ball. The maid remembered that they were short of some ingredients for tomorrow's dinner, so they sent the coachman to starve and asked Isla to bring him the list, but she never came back after that. Marie asked if they knew the coachman who drove the carriage. But the maid said that this was the guest house of the second prince, and no one would let a carriage with a coachman they didn't know. And unfortunately, one of the maids said she didn't know his name but remembered that he carried a sword. Then Alistair shrieked excitedly that it was not the coachman but a soldier of the royal family. In the same second, Alistair remembered that besides soldiers, his older brother Alexander and Lady Carla's servants could carry weapons. Then both Marie and Alistair could only think that Carla had kidnapped Isla. Somewhere in the basement, Isla was being held by some people, and Carla was among them. She was telling Isla that she had nothing to do with it. Carla was sure her mistress was coming to rescue her, but Isla wondered what she was after. So they put a knife to Isla's throat, and Carla stooped down to her and said that they would just wait until her mistress came to her rescue, and then they would grab her. After all, her mistress had dared to touch her main treasure, and she couldn't help but teach her a lesson. Carla also told Isla not to worry because she wouldn't kill her right away. First, she would mutilate her beautiful face, then she would let everyone take advantage of her, and finally she would chop off her legs and arms while she watched her die of blood loss. But Isla didn't want to let her do that, so she pushed the man with the knife, and he dropped it, and Isla caught it with her mouth. And then Isla thought she should have killed herself, and then the princess wouldn't be there. But then another man hit her on the shoulder, and she fell and dropped the knife. Carla said that she was very stupid, because even if she had killed herself, her mistress's fate was sealed. Carla ordered the men not to kill her, but in return, she allowed them to have fun with her until the princess got there. Marie had a rose and was about to go, but Alistair stopped her, not understanding where she was going. But she said she had to save Isla. Marie didn't even know what Carla was up to, but she knew she had to hurry. But Alistair said it was very rash to go alone like that. But Marie didn't understand what he was suggesting then, because she wasn't going to sit around and wait to be killed. Alistair said she needed to calm down first because Carla wouldn't kill her. Marie swore that she would protect Isla even at the cost of her own life. Marie already had tears in her eyes, as he didn't realize that she was more precious to her than her own life. Marie was ready to sacrifice everything she had just for Isla. Marie accidentally stepped on a flower and said that Carla was ruthless and insane and that she had already done something terrible to Isla. So she asked Alistair to let her go now. So Alistair let her go, but he immediately grabbed her hand again, turned her around, and kissed her cheek where her tears were running down her cheek. Alistair asked her to calm down and picked up a rose from the floor, telling her she had lost her gift. He gave the maid her flower and said that he was the one who would go to Carla, and Marie was to wait here. A servant also came to them with a parchment. Alistair remembered their agreement. Marie wanted a friendly treaty with their empire, so he gave it to her. As soon as her maid returned to the guest house, she was to go back to her homeland with her. And he opened it and showed Marie the piece with his signature. But Marie didn't understand why he'd do that. What with his freedom? He said he would go to Carla and promise to marry her in exchange for her life and the life of her nanny. Marie couldn't believe he'd go to her to save them and marry that crazy woman. He was willing to give up his freedom for Marie. Marie decided to stop him because she was against this turn of events. She didn't want him to sacrifice himself. But Alistair said that his father wanted him to marry Carla, and their plan was doomed to failure from the start. Alistair took her hands and said that his father had never been on the side of his sons, and he would never have accepted her as his bride. So he reassured Marie that everything was all right, and he wanted at least one of them to find happiness. Then Alistair turned around and was just going to leave. But Marie told him to stop and to tear the friendly pact to shreds. Alistair didn't understand why she did it. But Marie said that if he really thought that happiness at that price would make her happy, he obviously didn't know her very well. She wasn't going to give up on Carla. And then she suggested they fight together. After all, she believed that he was more worthy of happiness than anyone else. Then Marie noticed that his sympathy level had risen by 26%. So she reached out to him and offered to sign a peace pact once they had dealt with Carla once and for all. Marie wasn't going to let Carla get away with it after all she'd done, and then Alistair held out his hand to her in return and thanked her. Marie was sure there were many more ways to save Isla in other ways, like asking His Majesty Elliot to steal Isla with magic. And that was the fastest and most effective way of all. Alistair said she didn't quite realize how powerful Elliot was, and if he showed off his powers to everyone, it would cost him his life. Few mages possessed the magic of teleportation. People associate such magic with the dark arts, and if outsiders saw his true powers, they could easily accuse him of using dark magic and execute him. Marie wondered how they could save Isla without sacrificing anyone's life. Then Alistair said that the only force that would help them save Isla was Alexander's personal squad, the Thunderbirds. Marie thought she saw Alex training the boys in the royal garden. Alistair also added that Alex is the first prince of the empire and the only son of the queen, and he is the only one of the 5 princes whose authority is comparable to that of the king. Marie got a glimmer of hope, and Alistair continued that if she agreed to help them, then, before he could say anything, Marie pulled him towards the door. Marie said she would explain everything to His Highness Alexander and ask for his support. Alistair wanted to say that he would prepare the carriages. But Marie said that was a bad idea since Carla would immediately realize where they were going and could take countermeasures. Carla's residence was across the street from the first prince's headquarters, and if they wanted their plan to work, they had to go to Alexander without drawing attention to themselves. Alistair then decided to send a messenger with a letter to Alex and describe their situation. Marie said that as soon as he was done, they would go to His Highness. So they did. And the letter got to Alex, and he read that Carla had kidnapped the nanny of Princess Dark Yuri, a citizen of another country, and if Carla found out about their plans, she would immediately get rid of the hostage. The letter also said that a squad of Thunderbirds could handle Carla's bodyguards, and Alistair was well aware of that, so he asked for his help. Then Alex called Elliot. Then His Highness Alistair and Maria came to Alex. Alistair realized that apparently Alex had received his letter, but not even a second later, he said he refused to help them. But Alistair didn't understand why he didn't want to give the order to the Thunderbirds since Carla was literally taken hostage from a foreign country. Alex replied that there were many guests from other countries living in the palace at the moment. He wanted Alistair to imagine their surprise when a massacre would break out between the royal family members over some nanny. Marie couldn't stand it and said that, for the sake of this nanny, she realized that in Alex's eyes, she was just an ordinary servant. But for her, she was part of the family, so she wanted to ask him. But Alex interrupted her and asked her not to shout. He passed her and said that he would not involve the Thunderbirds in this conflict, but that didn't mean he wouldn't help them. Then, passing Marie Alexander, she said that he would personally deal with Carla. Marie begged him to stop and asked him to let her go with him because her family's life was at stake and she couldn't stand by. Alex held out his hand and helped her onto the horse. Marie was embarrassed and said she could have gotten on another horse. But Alex said that there was no horse in the royal stable faster than Griffin, so she had to hold on. Then Alistair ran out after them and ordered him to get a horse ready quickly. Upon arrival, Alex helped Marie get off Griffin. When Marie got off the horse, she felt sick, and Alex told her that he would deal with everything himself and why she had followed him. But at that moment, Marie thought that this horse was a monster, and she couldn't feel her legs. Alexander looked at Marie and blushed. Then he turned away from her and said that they were almost near the dungeon, and he would check the area for additional guards, and she had to sit and catch her breath. Marie sat down on the bench, realizing how much her legs hurt. After a couple minutes, Alex came back and said everything was clear and they could go. Alex petted Griffin, praised him, and said they would be back soon. As they walked along the wall and rounded the corner, she saw at least 3 guards that she had handled herself. Then Alex opened the doors and said that now they only had to go down the stairs quietly. But because she couldn't see well, she stumbled on the stairs and almost fell down screaming, but Alex caught her in time and covered her rock with his palm so that the noise wouldn't attract anyone's attention. Then he let her go and said that he asked her to be quiet, and he held out her hand for them to walk together. Alex told her to hold on tight because he'd noticed that she could see worse in the dark. And if she held on to him, she wouldn't fall. So they walked down the stairs holding hands. Marie thought she'd been thinking of him as a strict psycho, but he not only dared to help her and Alistair, but he cared about her. Then they reached the corner, and behind it was a guard that Alex disabled in a moment while keeping Marie on his toes. They were almost there. Then, walking a little further, Marie saw a cell that was unlocked, and in it lay Isla. She let go of Alex's hand and ran to her, but upon entering the cell, she didn't understand why all the guards were off. Elliot suddenly appeared in front of her and said that Isla was fine. He thought she'd been knocked out with a blunt object, but he found no other serious wounds. In a burst of emotion, she clung to Elliot and thanked him for saving her. But when Elliot hugged her back, he saw that Alex was not very happy about it. Elliot pulled away and said that His Highness Alexander had personally ordered him to deal with the guards inside the dungeon, and it was his idea. Marie realized that she should have thanked Alex for everything he had done for her. After thanking Alex, he turned around and started beating all the guards to leave beating marks to hide Elliot's involvement. Marie realized that despite his status as HH, Elliot would have been executed if he hadn't hidden his true potential. Suddenly, Alex heard someone approaching, so he told Elliot to leave. Then Carla came with her subordinates and wanted to know what His Highness was doing here. Alex told her to explain what was going on and why she had taken an innocent man hostage. But Carla was not afraid and saw that of all the people Marie could bring was Alexander. But she had a plan for that too. Then she said that this innocent lady had stolen her jewelry. Then Carla threw the bag of jewelry, but Marie knew it couldn't have belonged to Isla. Carla said that the jewelry was a gift from His Highness Alistair. Carla went on to say that Lady Dark Yuri had ordered them to be stolen, obviously harboring a strong grudge against her. But since she was here, she had asked him to take responsibility and confess what she had done. Carla decides she will eliminate both of them for good. Meanwhile, the main character denies ever ordering anything of the sort to her nanny. The girl with pink hair then challenges her, asking how she intends to prove her innocence, questioning where else her nanny could have gotten such jewelry. The main character responds by pointing out that the true criminal could have easily planted the wallet on Aya to frame her for theft. Carla grows uneasy at this, but the main character continues, arguing that if the jewelry truly were precious gifts from His Highness Lester to Carla, why hadn't she taken them immediately rather than leaving the wallet in the hands of a supposed thief? This reasoning reveals to the main character that Carla is doing everything she can to pin the blame on her and Aya. The lady with pink hair presses on, arguing that Carla's bodyguards apprehended the nanny and imprisoned her, while she only came to retrieve the stolen items. Carla smirks confidently, thinking that no matter what Maria says, her nephew will trust her over a foreigner. The main character, however, wonders if Alexander truly won't believe her and whether she will once again face an unjust execution. She cries out to His Highness, asking if he really doesn't find Carla's statements suspicious. The main character resolves that if Alexander sides with the villainess, she will never forgive him for the rest of her life. The girl with pink hair also appeals to Alexander, asserting that she has no reason to lie. Carla believes Alexander, mindful of his status and the royal family's influence, won't start a conflict over something trivial. However, Alexander lowers his gaze and declares that he will not allow Carla to tarnish the reputation of the imperial family with her selfish actions. He orders her to release the nanny immediately. The lady with pink hair, shocked, protests and reminds him that she is his niece and a royal. But Alexander coldly replies that her royal status does not absolve her of guilt. He warns her that if she continues to deny the crime, he will send her to court. In a desperate move, Carla signals to one of the guards, who draws his sword and attacks His Highness. The main character shouts for Alexander to turn around, and he swiftly subdues the guards, leaving them on the floor in front of the pink-haired girl. Alexander then looks icily at Carla, who stammers an apology, claiming her guards misunderstood the situation. However, she is reprimanded, and as punishment, Alexander declares that Carla will lose her bodyguards for the remainder of the festival. Furthermore, she is forbidden to leave her quarters and is ordered to apologize to Princess Derer. Carla is outraged, furious at having to bow to the princess of a small, insignificant country. But Alexander drives his sword into the ground and commands her to comply, leaving Carla fearful. She reluctantly apologizes to the princess. Alexander then turns to the main character, apologizing on behalf of the royal family for the suffering Maria and her nanny endured. He promises such incidents will never happen again and assures her he will personally handle matters. The main character reassures him that his apology isn't necessary, as he has already done so much for her and Aya. She is just relieved that her nanny is safe. Maria reflects on how grateful she is that everything ended well, while Alexander admires her composure, noting that any other lady might have panicked in such a situation. Before departing, Alexander instructs Elliot to leave. The red-haired man agrees, and the main character takes the opportunity to ask if he can heal Aya. Alexander explains that he is forbidden from using healing magic on anyone but himself. However, the blonde prince assures her that they will bring the nanny to the healing house, where Luca's medicinal herbs will restore her health. The main character expresses her gratitude but privately thinks about the third prince of the Link Empire, Luca, a renowned botanist dedicated to medicine, who might be able to help Aya further. She then asks if she can accompany her nanny to the healing house, not wanting to leave her side. Alexander agrees, telling her she can do as she wishes. Afterward, Alexander takes the young lady by the hand and says he will personally accompany her and her nanny. The blonde prince instructs his brother to meet him in his office once he finishes his task. The red-haired Elliot simply smiles before teleporting away. Meanwhile, Lester, walking through the street, notices Carla emerging from the dungeon. The second prince wonders if she came out entirely alone, but then he sees Alexander following after her. Concerned, Lester rushes to his brother, wondering where Maria is and why she isn't with him. When questioned, Alexander explains that Maria and her nanny have gone to the healing house with Elliot accompanying them. He adds that Aya, while not gravely injured, needs rest and treatment, and Maria wanted to stay with her. Lester finds himself puzzled by Alexander's change in attitude toward Maria, as it seems as though they've become close friends. The silver-haired prince comments that he appreciates his brother's help but could have handled the situation himself. The blonde prince counters, asking if Lester usually handles such matters this late at night, teasing that Maria must be his lover. He offers to take full responsibility for her, reminding his brother that he once suspected Maria of being a spy. Alexander dismisses these remarks, mounting his horse, and responds that Maria had wanted to stay with her nanny and didn't refuse Elliot's assistance. As for suspicions, he no longer harbors any against her. Lester is shocked by this statement, unable to believe his brother has stopped doubting Maria. The blonde prince turns back and suggests that if Lester is so concerned about her, he should visit the healing house himself. Later, Alexander begins looking for Elliot at the palace but doesn't find him in the office or his room. He wonders if Elliot could be in the bathroom, so he announces his presence and enters. However, the maids inform him that Lady Maria's bath is ready, causing Alexander to blush and wonder why Maria is in Elliot's bathroom. At the healing house, the fifth prince ensures Maria's nanny is attended to immediately. Aya is placed on a bed, and after some time, she regains consciousness. Her first words are ones of relief, grateful that Maria is safe. Maria reassures her nanny that everything is fine, though she acknowledges Aya has been through a lot. The main character realizes that her nanny wasn't just knocked out but also beaten. She advises Aya to rest and follow the doctor's instructions. Elliot, in the meantime, instructs the servants to prepare a warm rose oil bath for their guests. He tells Maria that the doctors will take good care of her nanny and suggests she take the opportunity to rest, perhaps by bathing. Maria, feeling exhausted from the day's events, agrees and thanks him. She asks the maids to watch over Aya, and they smile, assuring her that she can rely on them. Alexander, still flustered by the thought of Maria in the bath, questions why she ended up in Elliot's bathroom. Meanwhile, the maids assisting Maria ask her if the water temperature is comfortable. Maria assures them it's perfect and comments on the wonderful scent. One of the maids reveals that His Highness Elliot had ordered rose oil to soften the skin, adding that it's also His Highness Alexander's favorite fragrance. Maria reflects on how Alexander has proven to be kinder than she initially expected. Embarrassed by her observation, Alexander finds himself blushing at the compliment. One of the maids mentions to Maria that Alexander is truly a good person and asks her not to doubt him. Another maid scolds her colleague, reminding her to show proper respect to a princess. The head maid apologizes, explaining that Alexander has done so much good for them. Maria simply smiles, saying it's okay. The atmosphere reminds Maria of her home, where servants were treated like family and shared time together. She reflects on how different royal life is. Then, one of the maids hesitantly asks Maria about a mark on her neck. Embarrassed, Maria quickly comes up with an explanation, joking that His Highness mistook her for his beloved dog in his sleep and bit her. She adds that he even kissed her neck in his dream, leaving her shocked. The blonde prince overhears this and feels both surprised and embarrassed, wondering why this detail even matters to him. The maids comment on how His Highness Lester has always been known for his romantic nature, unlike Alexander, who tends to approach everything with such seriousness that it scares off the court ladies. Maria realizes this trait is also why she found Alexander intimidating at first. However, Maria remarks that she believes Alexander likely has many admirers. The head maid agrees, noting that all the maids admire His Highness Alexander deeply. One of the maids asks Maria what she thinks of His Highness, and the other maids eagerly wait for some gossip. Smiling, Maria replies that she admires him just as they do. The head maid, delighted, claims she knew it and encourages Maria to get to know His Highness better, convinced that Maria will grow even fonder of him. Another maid offers to wash Maria's hair. Meanwhile, Alexander stands outside the door, blushing deeply as he overhears their conversation. Gripping the door handle, he realizes this is definitely not something he needed to hear and leaves in a hurry. A short while later, Maria visits her nanny, who reassures her that she's fine and ready to return to her duties. However, as the nanny tries to get up, pain shoots through her body. Maria gently insists that her nanny needs to rest and recover fully before she even thinks about work. At that moment, Elliot enters the room and informs Maria that breakfast is ready. Maria acknowledges him, tells Aya to rest, and leaves for breakfast. On the way, Elliot inquires about Aya's condition, and Maria says that thanks to His Highness Luca's medicine, she's doing much better and is even eager to work. Elliot expresses his relief but advises that Aya rest for a few more days for a complete recovery. When Maria arrives at the dining table, she greets the person there with a cheerful good morning, only to discover that it's His Highness Alexander. He returns her greeting, but something seems off. Maria wonders why he won't look at her and if she's somehow done something wrong again. She thanks him for supporting Aya's treatment and ensuring she received proper care. Alexander brushes off her gratitude, telling her it's unnecessary. Maria grows even more confused by his cold demeanor, while Alexander internally struggles to stay composed, pretending he didn't overhear the conversation from the night before. Trying to distract himself, Alexander asks Maria if she's tired of all the formality in their interactions. She doesn't understand what he means, so he clarifies that calling him by his full name and title feels excessive. Most people just call him Alex. Internally, Alexander wonders why he's even asking her this, realizing it sounds like he's begging her to call him differently. Maria, however, protests, insisting that as the first prince of the empire, he deserves the utmost respect. Alexander dismisses this, stating he doesn't care about such things. When Maria hesitantly calls him Mr. Alex, she notices his level of affection visibly increase. Surprised, she thinks to herself, what just happened? Alexander then asks if she's okay with him addressing her informally as well, pointing out that it's one thing for Lester to do so, but quite another for him. Maria assures him that it doesn't bother her and that he can simply call her by her name. Checking the affection meter, she notices it has risen again, even though Alexander was angry just a moment ago. Alexander internally scolds himself, wondering why her simple agreement makes him so happy. Determined to maintain his dignity, he tells her not to misunderstand, calling each other by name means nothing. Maria, bemused by the prince's shifting emotions, notices his affection level is steadily increasing, reaching almost 30%. She wonders how this is happening, especially since she isn't doing anything to cause it. With a small smile, she reassures him that she understands. Once again, his affection rises, leaving Maria perplexed. Alexander, on the other hand, feels flustered, wondering why Maria is looking at him so intently. He notices her gaze, interpreting it as genuine interest in talking to him. Trying to redirect the conversation, he comments that she must be hungry and mentions that he had their chefs prepare some of the most popular dishes of the empire for her. He encourages her not to be shy and to try them. Maria thanks him and tastes one of the berries on the table, marveling at its delicious flavor. She asks Alexander if he'd like to join her for breakfast, but he replies that he's already eaten and encourages her to enjoy the meal. As she savors the berries, Maria reflects on how unique they taste, as though she's never eaten anything like them before. Meanwhile, Alexander watches her and thinks to himself that she seems to enjoy Lester's company more, as she smiles so brightly when she's with him. Elliot, observing his brother, realizes that Alexander is losing heart again and decides it's time to step in. Later, as Alexander walks down the corridor, Elliot approaches him and hands him 2 tickets to an upcoming fair, claiming that he personally organized it. He suggests Alexander attend the fair with Lady Maria. Alexander, caught off guard, questions why he should take her. Elliot reminds him that as the first prince, he has a responsibility to make amends for how Lady Carla mistreated Maria and their guests. Apologizing properly at the fair would be the right thing to do. However, Alexander replies that Maria would probably prefer to attend the fair with Lester, adding that she seems much happier in his company. Elliot pushes back, urging his brother not to think about Lester but to focus on what he wants. After a brief hesitation, Alexander unclenches his fists, takes one of the tickets, and walks away. Alexander explains that he doesn't want Lester to misunderstand their trip to the theater, so Elliot will accompany them. The red-haired prince simply smiles and mentions that Maria should be in her room, suggesting Alexander go invite her to the fair. The crown prince agrees, though Elliot wonders if he's rushing things and if his brother is truly ready to take more decisive steps. A little while later, Alexander arrives at Maria's room. When she hears the knock, she asks who it is, and he replies that it's him, Alexander. Maria opens the door and asks if he needs anything. Alexander tells her that he wanted to apologize once more for his niece's behavior. Maria reassures him that it's unnecessary, though she internally acknowledges that he's already done so much for her and Aya, and she can't possibly ask for more. Alexander hands her 2 tickets, explaining that as part of his apology, he'd like to invite her to a performance at the Royal Theatre. Maria is stunned, knowing that this is the most prestigious theater on the continent, where even aristocrats from the Link Empire struggle to get tickets. Alexander awkwardly explains that Elliot gave him the tickets, but Maria cuts him off, asking if he wants to go with her. The question catches Alexander off guard, and Maria notices his sympathy meter rise again. Maria then asks if he'd rather she go with Aya, but she adds that her nanny isn't well enough to leave the house yet. Alexander quickly assures her that isn't what he meant. Maria, still unsure, wonders if Alexander might be suggesting she go with Lester, since everyone seems to think they're romantically involved. But when she asks this, Alexander yells, "No!" Startled by his own reaction, he regains his composure and explains that Elliot is the organizer of the performance and can't attend with him, so he's asking if she would like to join him. Maria considers that refusing the prince's invitation would be rude, especially since Aya needs peace and quiet to rest. Smiling, she responds that she loves the theater and would be happy to accompany him. Alexander smiles in return, telling her that there's a fair happening near the theater during the day, so they can visit it before the performance. Maria turns to change her clothes, and Alexander suddenly worries that she might interpret this outing as a date. Panicking, he blurts out that Elliot will still be coming with them, so Lester doesn't need to worry. Maria only smiles at this, thinking to herself that there's no reason for Lester to care, as there's nothing romantic between them. A short while later, Alexander waits near the carriage. Elliot, standing nearby, thinks to himself that he feels like the third wheel. Using this as an excuse, Elliot tells Alexander that he needs to check on the actor's final rehearsal and asks if Alexander can manage without him for a bit. Nervously, Alexander asks if that's really necessary. Elliot smirks and thinks to himself that his brother is clearly inexperienced in dealing with women, so it's best to leave them alone for now. When Maria arrives, she apologizes for keeping him waiting. Alexander reassures her that there's no need to apologize since they're not in a hurry. But when he looks at her, he's momentarily stunned and embarrassed, awkwardly asking if bodyguards will be accompanying them. Maria, realizing that with Alexander, first prince of the empire, captain of the Thunderbolts, and the continent's strongest magician, they hardly need security, agrees that bodyguards aren't necessary. Alexander offers his hand to help her into the carriage, and Elliot, watching from the side, smiles as he announces their departure. Once they arrive at the fair, Maria is amazed by how lively the atmosphere is. Alexander explains that such grand fairs are organized in celebration of birthdays. He watches Maria's cheerful expression and notes how much she seems to be enjoying herself. Maria notices a shooting gallery among the activities, and Alexander explains that it's a simple game: hit the target several times in a row to win a prize. He hands the merchant a handful of gold coins, surprising the man, before picking up the gun and hitting the target with ease. He then asks Maria if she'd like to give it a try. Though hesitant, Maria agrees, admitting that while she's good with a bow, she's never used a gun before. Alexander instructs her to stand straight, lift her chest, and square her shoulders. Following his advice, Maria takes aim, pulls the trigger, and successfully hits the target. Turning to Alexander with a smile, she excitedly announces that she did it, but quickly realizes how close they are and feels embarrassed, much like Alexander. Stepping back, Alexander awkwardly says that she seems capable of handling it herself now, and Maria agrees. She takes a few more shots, enjoying the game more than she expected. The merchant, impressed by her skill, compliments her, saying it's rare to see a lady handle a weapon so well. Nearby, Alexander takes a few more shots and hits the target, remarking that it's not as difficult as it looks. Maria notices him grinning at her, though she isn't sure if she's imagining it. Elliot then approaches Alexander, teasing him for not following the usual custom of letting the lady win. However, before Alexander can respond, Maria fires several more shots, hitting the target each time. When the merchant announces that hitting the target 5 times earns a prize, Alexander smiles proudly as Maria prepares for her final shots. Alexander points to the hairpin as a prize, and Maria turns to him with a playful smile, proposing a bet. She suggests that whoever hits all the targets first will win the reward. The prince agrees, and Maria offers to take the first shot. Alexander, ever confident, remarks that he'll give her a head start since if he shoots first, she'll lose too quickly. Maria, thinking the prince is overly confident, takes her first shot and hits the target, but Alexander matches her immediately. Watching this unfold, Elliot notes how unusual the atmosphere feels. Maria, determined not to lose, focuses on the final target, but just as she's about to fire, a boy runs past her, momentarily distracting her. Her shot misses the target. Frustrated, she tells Alexander to take his shot. Elliot quietly begs his brother to miss this one, but Alexander effortlessly hits the target and wins. Taking the prize, Alexander approaches Maria and declares her defeat was inevitable. She concedes, admitting he's right, and Alexander places the hairpin on her, saying that since she lost, she has to wear it. Flustered, Maria asks what he means, and Alexander replies that the hairpin suits her perfectly. Embarrassed, Maria thanks him. When she glances at his sympathy level, she notices it has risen to 38, leaving her wondering how it keeps increasing so quickly. Smiling, she invites Alexander to continue exploring the fair, while internally noting that his sympathy seems to grow by the minute. As Alexander adjusts the hairpin on her head, he notes that it feels heavy and uses his magic to subtly reduce its weight so it stays securely in place. Elliot snaps his fingers, casting a spell to assist. Maria immediately realizes what they're doing, Alexander pretending to adjust the hairpin while Elliot discreetly casts magic, and finds their teamwork impressive. She smiles and thanks Alexander for his kind gesture, also expressing gratitude for inviting her on the outing. Alexander modestly replies that it was Elliot who insisted on the trip. Elliot then reminds them that the performance will begin soon and suggests Maria change into something more appropriate for the event, perhaps by visiting the first trading house of the Link Empire. Maria responds that she already has an outfit, but Alexander agrees with Elliot, saying it wouldn't hurt to look. Turning to Maria, he asks if she would like to visit the trading house with him. Smiling, Maria says she would be delighted. A short time later, they arrive at the trading house. Elliot steps out of the carriage with them but explains that he needs to check on the actors' final rehearsal and will meet them at the theater later. Once inside, the other patrons and staff are shocked to see the first prince of the empire accompanied by a woman. One of the workers immediately instructs the staff to prepare the finest new items for their guests. Maria notes the stunned reactions of the onlookers, realizing they didn't expect to see Alexander here with her. A staff member politely asks if they have any specific preferences. Alexander explains that they will be attending the Royal Theatre that evening and would like to find an appropriate outfit for the occasion. The worker bows and promises to bring suitable options right away. He then adds that if Maria sees any dress she likes on display, she should let them know. Alexander encourages Maria to pick something she likes, but he privately wonders if he might have overstepped by giving her the hairpin earlier. Meanwhile, Maria admires the high-quality dresses on display, her eyes landing on one in particular. She calls out to Alexander, asking him to take a look. When Alexander approaches, he remarks that the dress looks similar to the one Maria wore to the ball. Maria corrects him, pointing out that this dress is lighter, more comfortable, and has completely different embroidery. She compliments the craftsmanship, noting how much thought went into its design. Impressed by her observation, Alexander asks if she has an interest in fashion. Maria responds that she's fascinated by anything created by human hands, whether it's clothing, art, or music, because such creations bring beauty into the world and connect people's hearts. Alexander agrees, adding that such things are worth protecting. At that moment, the trading house staff return, apologizing for the wait. They present a selection of outfits and reveal that they've prepared paired outfits for the prince and his companion. The tailcoat and dress presented to them are designed in red and gold, inspired by the flag of the Link Empire. The staff explains that the designer created these outfits with the Empire in mind and asks if they would like to try them on. Maria wonders if the staff mistakenly assumed they were lovers but is soon distracted by the outfits. Alexander, on the other hand, worries that wearing matching outfits in public might spark rumors about their relationship. Not wanting to deal with Lester's questions later, he tries to decline, saying the outfits might not suit them. However, Maria interrupts him and points out that the outfits were made by a tailor from Daryuri. Surprised, Alexander asks if they are truly from her country, admitting he didn't realize Daryuri exported clothes to other kingdoms. Maria explains that the clothing industry is still developing there, and they've only recently begun exporting, but she thinks the craftsmanship is impressive. One of the staff members adds that the vibrant colors and unique design of the outfits immediately caught their attention, and they were confident customers would love them, and they were right. Smiling, Maria turns to Alexander and suggests they try the outfits on. Seeing her excitement, Alexander agrees, saying they can try them if she wishes. A short time later, they emerge from the fitting rooms. The staff compliments how great they look, and both Maria and Alexander glance at themselves in the mirror. The staff members insist the outfits suit them perfectly. Alexander internally debates whether buying these outfits is a good idea, while Maria reflects on how light and comfortable the dress feels. She concludes that this is a promising direction for Daryuri's growing trade and thinks about expanding the industry when she returns home. Alexander asks Maria if she likes the outfit, and she replies that it's excellent, noting how it symbolizes the friendship between the Empire and Daryuri. She mentions that she would like to buy the dress to support further imports into the Link Empire. Alexander, noticing her enthusiasm, turns to the staff and instructs them to purchase the entire catalog of outfits from Daryuri and 100 types of fabric from the kingdom to use for future designs. The staff, shocked by the large order, hesitates before asking if they truly need all 100 types of fabric. Maria, turning to Alexander, wonders if he's doing this to support her kingdom. Alexander responds that the outfits are crafted beautifully, and he sees no reason not to support the talented people who worked so hard on them. Maria is so touched by his generosity that she nearly cries, realizing that seeing Alexander in an outfit made in Daryuri will increase interest in their products. However, Alexander downplays his actions, saying that he simply liked the outfit and didn't do it for her sake. Maria, smiling, reassures him that she understands. Despite this, Alexander remains uneasy, aware that going out in these matching outfits will surely spark rumors. He decides to recommend these comfortable outfits to Elliot, Caillou, and Luca as well, subtly trying to divert attention. Maria agrees but internally thinks about Lester. The staff mentions that they're pleased the prince likes the outfits and offers an alternative color scheme for the tailcoat, but Alexander declines, stating that he prefers the current design. The staff asks if they should pack the outfit, but before Maria can say yes, Alexander intervenes, saying no, as there isn't much time left before the performance starts. A short time later, Maria and Alexander arrive at the Royal Theatre. As they enter, Maria feels the weight of everyone's eyes on them, clearly intrigued by their presence together. A worker greets them, welcoming them to the theatre and encouraging them to enjoy the performance.
He also offers them drinks, and Alexander requests 2 glasses of red wine.
Maria glances at Alexander, thinking that he just mentioned they were short on time, yet here he is ordering wine. They proceed to the balcony, which Maria notices is designed for 2. As they sit down, a worker brings their wine. Maria feels a strange atmosphere between them and decides to start a conversation. She mentions that it's her first time visiting the theater in the Link Empire, but before Alexander can respond, the theater lights suddenly go out.
Startled, Maria admits she's uncomfortable in the dark, and Alexander notices her unease.
Extending his hand, he gently tells her to close her eyes for a moment. Maria complies, trusting him, and closes her eyes. Alexander gazes at her face, her closed eyes and her lips, and finds himself unconsciously leaning closer to her. Just as he's about to kiss her, Maria asks when she can open her eyes.
Snapping back to reality, Alexander quickly pulls away and awkwardly tells her she can open them now.
Maria, unaware of what just happened, thinks she kept her eyes closed for a long time. Alexander, however, is embarrassed, wondering what he was about to do and scolding himself for his behavior. Maria looks at him curiously, thinking that Alexander asked her to close her eyes for some reason but is now acting strangely. At that moment, the theater performance begins, and one of the actors takes the stage. On stage, an actor holds up the Holy Grail, proclaiming it as a treasure sent by God to save their lands from all hardships. The audience marvels at its beauty, and Maria wonders if the rose petals falling around it were created using magic.
Alexander notices her thoughtful expression and asks if something is wrong.
Maria replies that she's just curious about where the petals are coming from. In her thoughts, she suspects that His Highness Elliot may have orchestrated this magical effect, though no one seems to care whether it's real magic or not. She comments aloud that the petals seem magical, but then realizes that this is the Royal Theatre, where magic is not supposed to be used openly. If people figured out the truth, it could cause trouble. Alexander reassures her, explaining that magic is indeed used in the theater, but it's part of the production, and no one minds or questions it here. Maria reflects that the actors must be aware the effects are created with magic, and yet they perform with such joy. Alexander, observing her expression, notes that most people in their world can't use magic, and their lack of understanding often leads to fear and alienation. Elliot, however, wanted to introduce people to magic in a positive way through the theater. Maria finds this idea wonderful and asks if Alexander was the one who came up with it. Embarrassed, Alexander admits it was, and Maria thinks about how many people might have criticized the use of magic on stage, fearing it could harm the audience. But with the first prince of the empire supporting it, no one dared to object. Alexander blushes slightly, saying there's nothing wrong with encouraging such performances. At that moment, 2 actors on stage rise into the air, surprising Maria. She instinctively places her hand on Alexander's and asks him to look, concerned about their safety. Alexander is slightly startled by her touch but comments that it's likely Elliot's magic at work again. Maria agrees, praising Elliot's incredible abilities, and reflects on how his magic even allowed her to visit the rose garden. Hearing this, Alexander thinks back to the rose garden and remembers that Maria mentioned Elliot had personally taken her there to see the flowers. He recalls his brother's long-standing desire to use magic to make people happy and wonders if that's why Elliot brought Maria to him and showed her Lawrence's rose. Though Alexander praises his brother aloud, Maria notices his expression suggests he's annoyed with Elliot. Checking the affection scale, she's surprised to see it has risen to 43, and she thinks they're getting closer to being friends. Maria then asks Alexander to let go of her hand, and as he does, he notices she's not wearing a wedding ring. This reminds him of her appearance at the ball as Lester's supposed bride. Curious, he directly asks her if she's truly in love with Lester. Maria is taken aback by the question and hesitates, but realizing there's no point in hiding the truth, she admits they're not in love. She explains that Lester is dear to her as a person, but their relationship isn't romantic. Alexander takes her hand again and simply says, "I see." Maria, surprised by his continued touch, asks if something is wrong. Alexander, feeling an unfamiliar emotion for the first time, changes the subject and tells her he's made a reservation at a restaurant. He asks if she'd like to join him after the performance. Shocked, Maria glances at the affection counter, which now reads 45,
and realizes Alexander is struggling to contain his growing feelings. A short time later, the two arrive at the restaurant. The staff welcomes them warmly, guiding them to their table. Once seated, Alexander turns to Maria and asks if she'd mind sharing a drink with him. Maria sees no reason to refuse and agrees. As the wine is poured, Alexander asks what they should toast to. Maria raises her glass and suggests toasting to the peace and prosperity of their empire. As they clink glasses, Maria reflects on how wonderful the day has been. For the first time since arriving in the empire, she feels truly relaxed. Alexander, slightly flustered, asks if Maria would like to step out onto the balcony. Maria agrees, thinking she's heard that the restaurant offers a spectacular view of the city. When they reach the balcony, Maria is captivated by the sight, admiring how beautiful the city looks at night. Alexander tells her that this spot is his favorite place in the capital. He explains how the Link Empire was once a small, barren country plagued by monsters, but with the power of the Holy Grail, they transformed it into the thriving nation it is today. Maria, deep in thought, considers how the power of the Grail cannot sustain the empire forever. She asks Alexander if, for the people of the empire, the Grail isn't simply a symbol of peace and prosperity. Alexander replies that this is true. The Grail gives people faith that their land is under God's protection. However, he believes that it is ultimately the people themselves who nurture and protect the empire. He expresses his wish for them to support the empire together in the future. Dropping to one knee, he declares this desire with all his heart and kisses Maria's hand. Maria is shocked by his gesture, but Alexander stands and confesses, "I love you, Marie." Glancing at his sympathy level, Maria notices that it has risen to 48. She thinks this might be her opportunity. If she becomes the beloved of the first prince of the Link Empire, she could finally take revenge on Louis. However, Maria tells Alexander that, unfortunately, she cannot return his feelings. She reminds him that she is engaged to the prince of the Kingdom of Ronia. Alexander, clearly taken aback, asks her to explain. Maria reveals that Prince Louis had originally sent her to the Empire with a mission, to steal one of their most sacred treasures. When Alexander asks which treasure, Maria hesitates but eventually admits that Louis had his sights set on the Holy Grail. His goal was the fall of the Link Empire, and to achieve it, he sought to steal the Grail. Maria adds that she couldn't refuse Louis because their countries had been allies for many years, and her refusal could have led to war. Alexander then asks if Maria's engagement to Lester was merely a ruse to support her country. Nodding, Maria confesses that it was. She believes that Alexander's affection for her is high enough for him to trust her, but she knows there's no guarantee he'll take her side. Alexander gently takes a strand of her hair in his hand, telling her that he has known about Prince Louis's plans all along. Now, having learned what Maria has endured, he pulls her into an embrace. Startled, Maria asks what he's doing, and Alexander replies that he can't imagine the hardships she has gone through. Maria wonders if Alexander is trying to console her. He leans closer to her ear and softly tells her that he doesn't want her to carry this burden alone anymore. He kisses her cheek and promises to help her save her homeland. Maria, surprised but touched, asks what he means. Alexander explains that he will assist her in protecting her country, but she must remain determined. Smiling, Maria agrees to his proposal. Later, as they ride in the carriage, Maria wonders if she made the right choice. She thinks about whether her family will survive if she allies with Alexander and stands against Louis. Looking out the window, Alexander asks if she's feeling nervous around him. Maria, caught off guard, asks what he means. Alexander sits beside her and points out that he can see the nervousness in her eyes. She denies it, but Alexander teasingly says it's no surprise. After all, how could she not be nervous after such a romantic declaration of love? Maria, slightly flustered, asks if he's flirting with her. Internally, however, her thoughts aren't on him, they're on the challenges she faces. Alexander, watching her, feels relieved to see her smile again. Maria thinks to herself that she has no time for love, and aside from Alexander, she has another ally. Turning to him, she begins to speak, but Alexander interrupts, guessing that she wants to talk about Lester. He realizes that Maria sees him as an ally and trusts him, which doesn't surprise him.
Maria confirms that she wants to return to the guest house to see Lester and ensure he looks after Aya. She knows that to change the future, she must use all the resources available to her. Alexander agrees to her request and reiterates that he wants to be her ally. He tells her that she can always rely on him for help. Though Alexander realizes Maria is still cautious with him and that earning her full trust will be difficult, his feelings for her remain unchanged.
Maria smiles sincerely and thanks him, and Alexander smiles in return.
The two spend the rest of the ride in comfortable silence.